pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to open up with public comment. Item number 3. The City Council will receive comments on matters that do not concern personnel matters or handled by the city manager, and items that are already on the agenda. We would ask if you have comments, you limit them to 2 minutes. Come up here, sit at the table, and give your name, and we'll go from there. So are there any individuals who would have public comment? Briar, if you want to come on up and sit. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Ryan Rickson. As some of you may know, June is National Pride Month, commemorating the 1969 Stonewall riots in New York City that marked the tipping point for the LGBTQIA+ rights movement. Some of you may also be aware that June 19th marks the emancipation of slaves in America, Juneteenth. Across America, towns and cities celebrate these events with parades, marches, parties, concerts, speakers, flags, official ceremonies, and other official acknowledgement. This year, here in St. Albans City, the city is not holding any events to celebrate these important milestones in U.S. history. In the meantime, our city continues to be in the midst of an ongoing white nationalist campaign recruitment. And BIPOC and queer representation in both City Hall and in city-sanctioned events like our summer concert series are non-existent. Meanwhile, just over the city lines in St. Albans town, they've taken great strides to become a more welcoming community by the simple act of acknowledging these important events with, for example, a publicly visible addition to the racially inclusive pride flag to their town logo on Facebook earlier this month. Vermont, and St. Albans in particular, has a long and storied history of iconoclasm and doing what is right for all. Over a century ago, St. Albans was one of the last stops on the Underground Railroad, and city father Lawrence Brainerd was one of the state's most outspoken abolitionists, helping freed slaves to escape and employing them at his store right here on Main Street. Now, well over 100 years later, we have the opportunity to pick up that mantle of equity and again make changes that help recognize our shared humanity and uplift the voices in our community that have not been heard from. The city can no longer ignore its marginalized citizens. Neighbors for a Safer St. Albans is requesting a seat at the table for those marginalized voices in the form of an Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee to advise city leadership on how it can operate in the 21st century. St. Albans City needs a group of dedicated, marginalized community members that can help the city foster an environment where people aren't just welcomed, but given a chance and a voice. A group led, organized by, and comprised of people who represent various facets of the community. A group designed to support and encourage substantive change of policy and procedure. It's become apparent that the city needs help in navigating issues of identity, representation, and belonging. This group could help in that endeavor. Thank you for your consideration, and there's just a list of interested and endorsing community members here that can be maybe entered into the record. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to leave that with?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Do you want to stand on the Christmas?
Give it to Chris.
Hi everyone,
Hello, Eric.
I'm
How
Reese
are you?
Kelly, nice to see you in person. I wanted to, in support of what Ryer shared, share just a little story about the pride flag at my house since I moved here. My partner Joe is a 13th generation Vermonter, which I didn't even know most white families could say that, but he can. And when we moved up here, we have a flagpole outside our house, and we had this pride flag that I had for months, and we never hung it. And I looked at it, and he told me that he was really afraid of harassment or bullying or people damaging our house if we put it up outside. And I'm someone who risks that, but a lot of people don't. And eventually we put it up. I was surprised. I came home one day and it was up, and I love it, and it makes me happy. And ever since, we've had people stop by and take pictures, say that they like the flag. But I want to share with you that we've received notes from young queer kids in the neighborhood thanking us for putting up the flag. So I actually brought them because I think they're adorable. So one was around Christmas time, and it's written on a scrap of paper that says, Thank you for putting up the LGBTQ plus flag. It was stuck in our mailbox. This other one that was actually put up a couple months ago by these two girls says, thank you for supporting LGBTQ plus, and we really like your flag. We support too and are a part of the LGBTQ plus. Thank you. I also 2 weeks ago had a young girl stop by and talk to me while I was on my porch. She had injured her toe while riding her bike and she was bleeding, and she asked me if I can get a Band-Aid. I ran upstairs and I bandaged up her toe. She told me that she felt safe asking me for help because of our pride flag. She gave me this adorable rainbow bracelet, which doesn't fit on me because it's too small, as a gesture of thank you. And I want to bring this up because I think that there are some things that are small but actually have a really significant impact on our community. And I also bring it up because I get that, these kids get that, but not everyone gets that. This flag is specific. It names in a symbolic way who we are and that we recognize each other, and it means a lot more than sort of broad gestures or welcomes. And so I just want to end with one of my, with a quote or a point from The Office that I actually think relates to this, which is one time when Michael finds out that he's bankrupt, Oscar tells him on The Office that he has to declare bankruptcy. And so Michael yells out loud in the office, "I declare bankruptcy!" And Oscar said, that's not how this works. So I offer that to you as, in your declarations, are they as empty as Michael's declaration of bankruptcy? Or are they as specific, meaningful, and connected and brought to you by the communities you want to represent in the way that this brought meaning to these students? These kids. Thank you.
If you don't mind me asking, where do you live?
I live on Messenger Street.
Can you leave those notes for us? For just,
Yeah,
just a
I would
while?
like them back. They've been on my fridge, but you can take a look.
I would dare say one of those girls is my daughter.
I was going to say, it looks like Smith handwriting.
Those Christmas notes got them, gave a lot of good feelings to many. It wasn't just yours, but many others. So, anyone else that would like to make public comment? Thank you for that, by the way. So I just want to, Ryer, to your point, we have a couple things that, is Lisa here yet? Yeah. Oh, there. Lisa's gonna, one of the questions I have for Lisa is a display that the museum's doing relative to the Underground Railroad. We'll be getting an update on that. That's something that the city has paid for. And to your point, Reese, we are committed to this, and we hope to prove that in coming months. So, any other comments? Then we'll move on to the manager's report, number 4, starting with the social media policy and implicit bias training.
Thank you, Mayor. The reason we don't allow employees personal transgressions to be public fodder at council meetings is it's our job to reflect and communicate the values of the organization. And we have to be able to do that by cultivating a sense of empathy in our employees. You don't get to equity until you do empathy first. And I've looked through our personnel policies over the weekend and last week, and I think they're adequate to address what most of the occurrences that happen with our personnel. But we haven't looked at them in 10 years. And to that extent, I don't think they're reflective of our current values, and they don't necessarily reflect changes in employment practices, much of which is changing very rapidly, even within the last 3 to 5 years. So I think we have the tools available in the broad strokes to hold employees accountable, but I think they could be a lot better, and I think they could speak to the times in which we live, and they don't. So that's on me, that's on the leaders of this organization to be sure that our policies are reflecting our values. We're probably going to need some help with that, both external, professional help. Many of these rules don't exist. It's not yet a best practice in HR to figure out how you regulate people's private posts. So we're going to need some help for that. And we're also going to need some input from that. I think your idea for an equity committee, it's a great one. It's something I would support, not up to me, but at the staff level. It's something I would support. So we welcome that. This conversation has to stay on the policy level, not on the employee level. And it'll be tempting for all of us to dive down to that, but that's really not something that this board engages in. But my main message here is we realize that there's more that we need to do to create the tools to set the expectations for our employees, specifically about how they conduct themselves and what is the type of behavior that we expect both at the workplace and in that nebulous area on the internet where our personal and professional lives get fused. So I'll take that on. That's my job, is to be sure that we get those tools in place. It's ironic that the situation that blew up over the last few days occurred at the same time that we were working with a group that we've assembled to figure out how to respond to some of the hate speech in the neighborhood, in the city. And for many months now, we've been trying to figure out how do we respond to the Patriot Front activism. And the best way to respond to speech, hurtful speech, hateful speech, is with positive speech that reflects your values. One of the tactics of the Patriot Front, incidentally, is to try to provoke a response from the local government in which they conduct their activities. If you Google them, it's a tried and tested method of theirs to generate funds for their activities by provoking a reaction on behalf of the local municipality. But one of the things that's important, I think, for municipalities to do in the way that we speak around values is through symbols and through programs and through money. And so to that end, one of the ideas that the committee came up with was the welcome banner that we have over the city. And some of the religious folks that were with part of our committee were looking at the welcome banner and some of the ideas, and sort of organically out of this group, the idea generated to expand that, to say it's not just welcome, but all are welcome, which is a traditional hymn. And ironically, it was a similar campaign that our downtown board had been after a year ago. They felt a similar desire to express where they stand, and they were on a similar path. So we're suggesting to the council that we make not just a one-time change to our logo for the rainbow for the month, but that we rebrand the entrance to the city with this logo and this graphic that clarifies that all are welcome here. So both of those themes, there's a lot of overlap between our desire to be explicit about our values and get the tools in place to hold our employees accountable, and to also develop the symbols that would speak to the community at large about where we stand, and more than, we get a lot of feedback that it's not just about banners and posters. You need to do something more than that. And, when I ask folks, well, okay, what is that thing? The menu isn't always forthcoming. I think the equity committee is a good first start, but some of the faith groups that are active in this group with us, this working group, have suggested maybe there's a way to do some food events that help bring different cultures together and allow people to communicate and connect around food, and maybe that could be paired with some community conversations around these themes, both of pushing back against the Patriot Front and some of that speech, and also the desires around equity and belonging. So that's something that I think that we can help support and facilitate and fund, but it'd be good to have some participation from folks outside of City Hall as part of that. Those are my thoughts. I'd welcome any input, direction from the council or the public.
Questions, comments?
Banner okay? That work?
Yeah, seems fine. I like the direction we're talking about now, so.
You're just doing over the street banners, or what about the light banners?
We can look at the light banners as well. So it's a good question. The light banners have words running down the side, and 10 years ago when we did those words, we were limited to 4-letter words. None of my suggestions made it on. But our values then were really focused around community vitality, right? And so they were stay and shop and dine and things like that. And to the extent that the values of today go in a different direction, I think that's something we could look at as well. Both permanently, those banners are, we have 3 or 4 sets that rotate in and out over the course of the year, and then also seasonally. I think it's a place where if there's specific events, we could have short-term banners go up. We haven't quite figured out the best way to do the event banners. We haven't found a design and a manufacturer that can quickly make some that last as long as we would like, but I think we can figure out the operational aspects of that.
Michael?
So, Don, kind of related to this, what would it take for us, I think we've never had a conversation at the city council level about what does it mean for the city council to recognize Pride Month or to recognize Juneteenth, for instance, and just historically, procedurally, what has been the role of the city council in acknowledging those periods of time where we're recognizing groups, where we're trying to celebrate the diversity in our community? Is there a precedent for that? Because up until very recently, I never thought of that as a role of the city council, and we have heard people here today and this conversation, especially in light of the town. I'm just wondering if there is kind of a way for us as the city council to do that that's appropriate.
Sure. Well, the council meets monthly, right? So, we've got a couple of special meetings there, so 13 to 15 meetings a year. And in that time, it can be hard to see things that are coming forward. And we're a pretty small crew. We don't have an events coordinator, for instance. Some communities do. And we've never looked you know, at most of the things that occur, all right, so, you know, what are the big events in the city annually? The festivals, right?
Yeah.
You know, obviously, we got the Maple Festival,
Festival of Trees.
you know, so what are they? Festival of Trees, Maple Fest, what else?
You got the wine and cheese in there.
Wine- Yeah,
You got St. Patty's Day Parade, Halloween,
none, none,
tractor parade.
none of those are led by the city. All those events that people see in the city as reflecting culture in the city are citizen-led, community-led events that the city partners with, but it's not our event, right? And so it's a bit of a turn to say, all right, what are going to be the city events, right? You know, that's a, you know, and what that means is, so that's a budget issue, right? If, you know, if we're going to, so typically, we've been a partner. We've done a proclamation. We've helped promote, but we haven't organized. I mean, that takes a lot to pull off a good event. So, you know, if the council wants that to be part of the program, that's a conversation that we can certainly have. But to the extent that there's folks in the community, the reason we have a Maple Fest is because there were a bunch of people in the community who came forward and did it. The reason we have the tractor parade is because the co-op did it. So, you know, to the extent that folks really want that to be a priority, that's an option.
Thanks.
And to that point, Dom and I spoke about that on, what day were we, last Thursday,
Yeah.
about the potential for a part-time events coordinator to potentially bring some of those, help organizations like the Maple Festival, whoever, to pull together the loose ends that volunteers may not have the time to do. So that would be something that, when we talk, we need to set a date for our strategies and goals, but to include that and see what the level of interest is for an events coordinator.
There's an important balance to strike there. You know, the partnerships play to their strengths. We're the government, right?
Right.
Our strengths aren't necessarily in pulling, you know, there's a richness of those community-led events because they're community events, right? And we want to be careful about taking those over and having them all become city events, because inevitably they begin to have the same look and feel, and you know, there's a role for some logistical support in making it happen, but I think the fact that they're community-led is an important strength.
Any other questions for Dom on this? Anyone, any questions? Reese?
Yeah, I'm curious, so, should I do the mic?
No, you're good. You're good.
So my story about my flag and seeing the banner recommendation on the agenda was deeply recognizing that there are symbols that are reflective of my community and of other folks' communities, that it's the specificity of it that actually matters. You know, the little girl, for example, who needed a Band-Aid because her toe was bleeding, didn't say you had a welcome sign at your door, right? It's that you had a pride flag that I recognized, and that's what made me feel safe. I do think that an all are welcome is, you know, the Michael's version of declaring bankruptcy. I don't know what that does. And I don't mean this to hurt anyone who put time into thinking through what are good ways of welcoming people here. I'm speaking from my own experience. I'm speaking from doing very similar work at an institutional level in higher education. And I just want to put out there that there are things that reflect our cultures because that's what brings meaning to us, right? And leaving that meaning out is actually leaving one of the most important things out of the experience. You know, I'm gonna look for things that show me that it's welcoming, that show me that they connect and understand the things that are unique and different, not about everyone. And I know that, I think that that can be hard to understand and grapple with when you have not been a part of a small community, really seeking out others like you and a sea of everyone that kind of looks the same, right? And so I just want to acknowledge that the impetus behind the banner is really important to acknowledge. If it's about addressing that we have white nationalist recruiters in our community putting up stickers, why don't we address that and having things that are racially specific? Why don't we have a Juneteenth banner or flag that's up? Why don't we have a Pride flag or banner that's up? Why don't we have like a Latinx Heritage Month flag that goes up? Like, that is okay too, and that is actually, from my experience, again, only speaking for myself, that is more meaningful because it speaks to my experience of why I don't feel like I belong in this community. Everything else feels like it's empty. It feels like it is helping you feel like you're helping me belong. It doesn't help me feel like I belong. So I just want to bring that to you and your deliberation over whether it is this banner or whether something else is considered like specific acknowledgements of the events that are important to people in marginalized communities.
Reese, thank you for that. I guess my question is, how do you do it so you cover all groups? I mean, there's a lot of different groups. How do you get to that point?
From having done this in organizations, it's helpful to have a group of people who are charged with vetting that, where requests go to them, where they have maybe more experience or connection or desire to be a part of that. That really grapple with, is this reflective of a community? Or is this reflective, for example, of an occupation? Those are different nuances that I think people in city government, we're not necessarily demanding or requesting that you know that, but there are people that know that can help you toe that line in a way that is productive.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
Hi, I'm Courtney Steele. It's nice to see you without masks on. I would just like to go back to 4A for a moment, please. And I ask that not just looking at your employee handbook, but also looking at your hiring practices, because it's been pretty standard for quite a while, even for people applying to colleges or things, that social media is on the table when accepting a student to a college or hiring someone for a job. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And when we start talking about some sort of an updated policy, obviously social media is going to become a factor in that, for sure.
Comments?
Yes, I think it's also important to think about how you restore community faith in, so if you're not talking about personnel, but any community, if some harm was done, finding ways to show remorse to a community, perhaps restorative practices could come into play there, but recognizing that harm is real and that there is responsibility not only on the part of an individual, but on an organization to repair that harm.
Thank you. And can you just share your name, please?
Oh, Marisa Miles.
Thank you. Any other comments?
So I just want to share something. So Zach sent me some information today from the ADL, and it just the basis of it was you have to give the power to the people that are marginalized to fight basically the white nationalist stuff we're seeing. I don't want to say the name. So I think that speaks a lot to what Reese is saying. If you're the way to give the marginalized community the power is to display their symbols very publicly. So that might be something that I think we should look into doing pretty seriously, just because that's going to give these people, Reese and the community in Ryer and all these other communities, all the power to.
How do we do that without affording the same ability of the people that are against this movement, their right to be able to do that. We're a municipality.
Yeah,
Mike's gonna be more elegant.
So I want to be very careful when we're talking about people's identity as individuals, especially of protected classes, whether it's race, or gender identity, or sexual orientation, creating a false equivalency between that and people who have political agendas, especially when they're about elevating a majority group that already has a lot of power at the expense of minority groups. And that's the message that we're seeing in this propaganda that has, I really hope that there's a person or two that's just very persistent in putting this stuff up in our community. But regardless, I want to make sure we're creating authentic opportunities for people in our community to that we're helping them as their government, as their representatives, to elevate positive messages about our inclusivity and our diversity and celebrating the different smaller communities that are part of our bigger community. I think we can do that by celebrating the different identities that people have, the culture, the heritage, the community, their identity as human beings, elevate them as human beings, and not have to afford the same importance or some kind of equivalency to people that have a political agenda, because being LGBTQ, identifying, or being black, or being Latinx is not a choice. It's who you are. And I think it's been particularly difficult, or it's felt. It's felt like something we need to defend against as white people that have a lot of power, and we don't always recognize it because of the skin we're in. And so when you ask that question, Councilman Hawkins, in all the conversations that I'm having, whether it's at the State House or here in our community, about just these really difficult learning that a lot of us, cis white people have to do right now, and that we're being called to do. There's been a lot of a conversation about, in another community, their city government wanted to have the legislature basically mandate that they only have to put up the American flag and a couple of the state flag and the POW MIA flag, so that they were sort of absolved of the responsibility of having to respond to the calls for a Black Lives Matter flag or a thin blue line flag. And so those two things, the Black Lives Matter flag and the thin blue line flag, were put up as being equivalent in the conversations in that community. When one is about elevating human beings who are really struggling throughout our society to be seen, be heard, and be valued, and have their lives valued in the same way. And the other is a reaction to that movement that, with all due respect to law enforcement, is a political flag. And it's elevating human beings. And our role in doing that, when we're recognizing there's this reckoning and awakening happening now. We've got people in our community that are asking us to do the messy, hard, difficult work of addressing that. And, I really want to be careful about creating that false equivalency. And I think that we can do that. I think we'll need help doing it, and we'll need authentic help from people in our community who can represent and speak for the smaller communities within our larger community. Sorry for that long rant.
No, makes sense.
Do you remember, Chad, when Liz was mayor? I think maybe Dominic, myself, and you are the only ones here. When that person came up and wanted to have a constitutional day in the park.
That's what Dom was talking about. I can't remember.
She wanted us to have a day every year.
I was,
But you were on the council, Jim? And I forwarded a couple of questions to her, why it looked like it wasn't an invitation to everybody. And we disallowed that. We didn't allow that to happen because of those underpinnings. And there was a group of people, 20 people or 30 people that said, hey, it's just about the Constitution, and it's a very easy document to read, and it's easily understandable, which we all know is not the case. But we know what the underpinnings were to that. And they couldn't answer those questions. And Liz agreed, as the majority, as all the council agreed, that we were not going to have that event.
Yeah, I don't remember, I don't remember that, Tim, but
Yeah.
I'm not saying it didn't happen.
Yeah.
For me, like, I
It
look.
was Linda, when Linda sound off, Linda came,
Yeah.
and she wanted that.
So, and I'm not I'm not a marketing expert, I'm a white heterosexual dude, I mean, I'm all the things that, I have no knowledge, I am ignorant to all things just about. But like, when I saw the banner, the one thing I was like, what would make it just easier for me is to keep it all the same, but the lettering was black, brown, the rainbow flag, and trans flag at the end. That's, it just changed the color of the lettering to a different color each letter. I mean, that was a simple thing that I saw that I felt like could make a big difference. And, when we talk about all inclusive, it's all there, all the colors are there, so. I don't need propping up, I don't feel like I need propping up, I'm propped up enough in my life, so. I think if someone feels like they need propping up and they're a white heterosexual dude, they gotta do some soul searching.
I thought of a simpler way to summarize the long comments that I had before, which is that I think we as a council, and maybe with some help from a little committee that we might create, could tell the difference between somebody who came to us and said, hey, I want you to sponsor this cultural event that's about my heritage, and is going to have food, and it's going to be open to the public, and it's going to have music, and it's going to be this thing in the park, versus somebody who says, I have a, want to have a, white nationalist rally, and when we look at the content, the inclusivity, and who they are, I think we could develop policy around that.
Number one, no
And be
one's ever going to
consistent.
come with example number 2 and say that to us. I don't believe it.
But I think
They're
we'd
gonna
be able
couch
to
it in
know
a
it.
different way.
I think we would know it when we see it, just like the posters that we're seeing right now, right, that are promoting this hateful organization. On the surface, it doesn't look offensive at first glance to most of us. Like, a lot of us know what it is and can recognize it for what it is by just peeling under the surface a little bit. And I think we could develop policy to be
Well,
consistent.
why
and
couldn't
fair.
we do what you said in example 1? We've had block parties in our
Sure.
city. I remember we shut the whole Main Street down, and we had a huge party on Main Street. And why can't we do that?
No, I don't think we disagree at all. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that we'll know it when we see it, and I think we can develop good policy around, whether it's a symbol of a flag or it's an event that somebody's asking us to endorse or partner on. I don't think we disagree at all.
Ryder?
If I might just piggyback on what Mike said. Every year, my wife and I threw a Juneteenth party when we lived in Bristol. Every year we threw one, and we're throwing one this year as well. But this year, we can't invite the entire community because there's white nationalists putting up stickers around town, and I don't want to put my address out to the public to invite them. So we do a thing, we have to hide it, I have to stay behind the smoke screen, and then people have to email and ask if they can come, and that's sad. I'm not asking for funds to throw a Juneteenth party. I'm just asking for a community where I feel safe enough to invite the community to my house to have a Juneteenth party. You understand what I'm saying? So it isn't a question of using government funds to support me. The town of St. Albans didn't spend any money to fix their logo and put a racially inclusive pride flag on it. So I think we're having this big debate, and that's great. But all we're really asking for is just a community that thinks a little bit about us and makes it safe for us and makes it so that I can spend $1,000 to invite the city over and have a party. I will do that because Juneteenth is this huge celebration for me. It's always been, and I love it. Pride is a huge celebration. We're not really asking you at this moment to throw a pride parade. We're just asking you to put up some flags along Main Street, celebrate pride, and like make sure that people know that, hey, you know, LGBTQIA plus people are part of this community. They're welcome, they contribute to our lives, they add to our culture, they add to like who we are as a community. So I just want to like really clarify that. We're definitely not asking for anything budgetary, we're not asking for anything like that. We're just asking for a safe community and maybe, you know, a flag every once in a while or a symbol every once in a while.
Well, why wouldn't you, Ryer, want to have a Juneteenth celebration citywide in the park or something? Why wouldn't you want to have a pride parade? I mean, it's something the city could get behind and help support you guys if you want to organize it.
Right, and that's the thing. I don't think the city's understands what Juneteenth is. I don't think the city understands what pride is. And I don't think you would do justice to it.
And I'm not saying we're going to organize it.
Right.
They're going to organize it.
Right,
They're going to educate us as to what it is.
This is the argument towards having an equity council and having an inclusivity council this would be a good body that could help inform this.
I don't expect you to know what Juneteenth is, but.
I do know what Juneteenth is.
I'm sorry, but what I mean to say is I wouldn't expect you guys to know in May, like, hey, we should prepare a statement for Juneteenth, or hey, in May, we should support a thing for Pride. But if you had a group of people who knew Juneteenth was coming, or knew Pride was coming, and it was in their purview, then that's the kind of thing you say, oh, they can say to you, hey, you know what, Juneteenth is coming, and, you know, you probably should put up a thing for it, or Pride's coming, let's get those flags up, or whatever, let's get the logo changed.
I mean, I can't speak for the council, I can't speak for the city, I can only speak for me, and I'm just brainstorming. But, you know, obviously, a banner, we can't do everything on now on one banner that goes across the city. But what if we had flagpoles in the park and put a pride flag up one month, put a Black Lives Matter flag up, something to show that the city supports it. We do it in the winter time. We have menorah, we have we have the different religions. But why can't we do something like that here to show that the city is supportive of being all inclusive? I mean,
Symbols mean a lot. Symbols mean a lot.
yeah, that's what I think.
So, anyone want last word? We need to move on here.
Tim, I need to clarify. Sorry, go ahead, sir.
I just wanted to have a short note that my name is Jeffrey Nelson, and I ran up against what amounts to bigotry 3, 4, 5.0 recently. Every time we have standards, the groups learn, and even though nowadays they're saying the quiet parts out loud, plenty of them are, guess what? They're always going to develop these new terms. I learned more specifically, I knew in the back of my mind what a globalist was, but that's one of the new catchphrases for anti-Semitism and impugning our Jewish brethren worldwide. But I just wanted to encourage, sort of stressing what people are saying about getting more advice, brushing up, having people whose focus is on finding out what staying on top of things, because some stuff is obvious, and I'm sad to say that it's too obvious, some of the stuff that is not being done something about, but other stuff takes research.
Appreciate that, thank you. Tom?
The all are welcome here wasn't designed to be a substitute for Pride Month. Pride Month will have come and gone by the time this is up. It was a totally different effort to try to find something that was more foundational and more overarching that unified all of it. And we're taking some heat for not being intuitive and to see this coming. At the same time, you're saying we wouldn't expect you to know, and we'd like to help. This whole conversation 2 months ago was an entirely different conversation, right? Right now, we're back on our heels, being told to be more like St. Albans town, which never happens, right? You're really kicking us where it hurts. And then it's a timing issue, you know? This is, 30 days ago, we couldn't sit in a room and talk. And now we're able to sit in a room and have this conversation. And the whole framing of it is, boy, you guys missed it. And, okay, I'll accept responsibility for not being in tune enough to see it coming. And that's probably my privilege and my power that gives me that luxury. But I'm asking for your help for the next time. It's hard to fix this one in mid-June. But if there's something else coming up, I'm giving you the opportunity to say, let us know, and that's something we can work on. It can be a success, you know, and that's maybe something that can come out of this, is these guys meet once a month, right? Like, we need some runway to do something like that.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your comments, appreciate it. And we will be communicating as we move forward. Moving on to number 5, we welcome Director Lisa Evans from the St. Albans Museum. Still interim director, Lisa?
Yes, interim director.
No.
It's great to put some faces to the names. Thank you for having me. I'll try to keep it brief. I know time-wise we're a little crunched now. I'm really grateful actually to be following up on that conversation. I think that's a really good one for us to have, and does kind of bleed into a little bit about what I was going to talk about today anyway. But before I get to that, because I am brand new, not only to the museum, but to St. Albans, I actually live in Essex. I've been in Vermont for about 12 years, but I'm from Michigan. I am a Flatlander. My husband reminds me of that all the time. A little bit of background of how I came to the museum. I do have a BA in history from NVU Johnson. I'm currently in a master's program at Johns Hopkins University. I am serving as co-chair of the New England Museum Association for the Young and Emerging Professional Affinities Gathering. Also currently finishing my second year as president of the Chittenden County Historical Society. I was actually hired on as an intern for the St. Albans Museum, January of 2020. Look at me now. It came around pretty quickly. Obviously, as the pandemic hit, the museum closed. We had to pivot all of our operations, primarily being online. I'm sure you're all very well familiar with my predecessor, Alex Lenning, who's fantastic. He's absolutely my mentor. And you know, I'm trying to kind of fill his very big shoes. Not literally. Now, again, I started as intern. By the end of the summer, he asked me to stay on as the associate director of collections and programming. I had stepped in during the pandemic, and I was doing a lot more, I guess, heavier tasks than I was brought on to do as an intern, and I fulfilled that need. And by February, when Alex was leaving, he asked me to stay on as ED, and the board wholeheartedly, unanimously agreed that they wanted me to fill that role. So again, big shoes to fill. Alex has done amazing things with the museum. Not only Alex, but even his predecessors have set up the museum in such a wonderful way to be an integral part of this community. Now, I know that Alex set up something for us to be a museum without walls. That is one of the biggest challenges I'm trying to do right now, is to continue what we've started. Now, during the pandemic, it kind of hit us hard, all of us, obviously, but the museum couldn't be open. We had multiple challenges. Our ventilation system was poor, so, you know, even with putting up, you know, the plexi wall glass, things like that, we still couldn't be open because we had no outside airflow. We had professional assessments done who told us we could not safely open. So again, we moved everything to online. We continued holding programs through Zoom, and we managed to make it through. I'm sure that you have all heard by now that at the start of the pandemic, it was estimated that 1 out of every 3 museums in the nation would close their doors for good because of COVID. So for us to survive through that period, we're absolutely grateful to the community for showing us support during those hard times. And that kind of brings me, again, a little bit to the conversation that we were having. Now, I want to thank the city for providing us the funds for what became one of those Museum Without Walls projects. We have, actually Alex, before he left, he started a new committee, the DEAI, Diversity, Equity, Accessibility, Inclusion. And that new committee is meant to encompass everything that the museum does. And if I'm honest, everyone in the museum, we are all white. Primarily, everyone is over 60. And we do not have the right perspective. If we want to see these things through, we need to make sure we're seeing them through a new lens. So we want to bring the community in. We want them to be a part of what we are building. And we want to expand beyond our walls. So again, the city was graceful in giving us the funds in order to create what we originally were calling the Finding Freedom exhibit. And this exhibit was exploring Black history in St. Albans. It was brought up earlier that we were a stop on the Underground Railroad. It covers that. We talk about Lawrence Brainerd, who played a part in that, and some other key figures from Black history in this region. And again, we do not have the proper lens to tell that history. We have lots of history in the museum, don't get me wrong. We have so many documents, we have so many, we can rifle through all the newspapers and we can pull out photos. And you know what? We haven't come across a single photo of any of these key Black figures that we're putting this exhibit on for or about. Not a single one. So when we started doing the research for this, we realized that we can talk about the history. There's not a whole lot to show for the history, not a lot of visuals. So in this exhibit, we are exploring the history of Black Vermont, but we're also exploring the void of Black Vermont. Why isn't there as much history as we know there is? Because we have the documentation, we have photos from the 1800s, tons and tons of photos, but none of Black history. So that's something that we want to address, is why is the museum currently lacking on this diversity that we know exists? Where is it in our history? So we are addressing all of that in these panels. Now again, following that Museum Without Walls, movement that we're trying to create, these are going to be 4 mobile panels, retractable banners. They're about 6 feet tall, about 3 feet wide. And these panels are going to be able to travel to schools. We're also currently doing, we started this year doing pop-up exhibits at the Bay Market Farmers, or the Bay Park Farmers Market. In which actually we've been there, last week was incredibly successful. We've gotten a lot of attention for the museum. So we're gonna be able to bring these panels out into the community and bring education to the people, bring history to the people. So I just wanted to kind of give you an update on that project. We are nearing the end of the development stage, and we are getting into, we're getting quotes from printers. So we're gonna have those designed and printed. They're gonna be done by the end of summer, and we're gonna be able to start bringing them to schools right away in the fall. So we're arranging for that, which is also a wonderful thing. I know we've all heard that as of tomorrow, all restrictions are lifted, thank goodness. So I'm hoping that, with schools, we'll actually be able to get in there and maybe bring a presentation along with these banners. Now, I also just wanted to quickly say, the real reason I'm here today is because I'm also, I've applied to be on the Historic Preservation Commission. So I just wanted to kind of introduce you to myself and to give you a sense of what history means to me. And just, let you, I guess, give you an understanding that to me, even though I'm new to St. Albans, even though I live 40 minutes away in Essex, how much this community has already made an impression on me. The volunteers who work at that museum are amazing. We had some students in today from BFA on a field trip, a special field trip, because our museum is not ready to be open to the public. We have some cobwebs, to be sure. But the students that came in today, I let them know that everything you see in that museum has all been put together by volunteers. These are people who love our community, love our heritage, love our culture. And if it wasn't for our volunteers with that love for St. Albans, we would not have a museum. So that is my largest piece, as I said, to bring the community in, get the community's perspective. We are going to start leading a series of focus groups in July and August. We're asking for people to come in, be a part of these focus groups, and again, give us their perspective. What are we missing? What do we need? Do we have things that are offensive? Again, we might not know. There are things that have been in there since the 70s who, which again, have been put up by primarily older white people. So we want to address anything that we might not know we need to address. And we can only do that with others' perspective. So.
So one quick question for you. You mentioned you couldn't find information on so what are you moving forward with to make the banners and whatnot?
No, we have plenty of information. We have a lack of visuals. Yeah.
Are the banners mostly text, or are there photographs and drawings and things like that on them?
Yeah, so again, thank you to the city for the funding. That is helping us actually get in touch with the graphic designer so we can come up with some creative ways to visualize these stories. We have a lot of narratives, as I said, from key figures in history. So we have, basically a lot of biographical text, and we'll be able to supplement that with some creative imagery.
We're talking history, Lisa. What history are we talking about? What eras?
So primarily the late 1800s. We are going up to, I believe the most recent figure is from roughly 1930, off the top of my head. Yeah.
Are you the only paid employee of the library?
I am the only paid employee of the museum.
I meant the museum.
Yeah. And it's part-time. Alex was full-time, and Alex was actually the only full-time employee the museum has ever had. And prior to him, we had 2 paid part-time directors before Alex came in, and Alex actually started as part-time as well. So the museum does need to cut back a little bit, and they're going back to part-time. So we're hoping to make that model work. But again, with our volunteers, they're helping make it work.
Seems like our museum is in good hands right now.
Thank you.
So it won't be opening for public activity this summer?
So we are doing, again, we have the Bay Park Farmers Markets. That's every Thursday from 4:30 to 7:30. We have a tent up. That's kind of our primary focus for the summer right now as far as activities and events go. But that is generally all that we can do at this time.
And what is your time frame on the air exchanger repair?
So,
replacement?
so currently, so what we're looking at, and, you know, time flies during a pandemic. A few months ago, we were looking at the fact that if we cannot open without this air exchanger, then we need to invest in it, obviously. At this point, we have talked to some professionals who said that we can now open. Given the summer, we will have to have, you know, windows open where we can. But otherwise, with all restrictions being lifted, we fortunately can open without having to invest in that at the moment. But we do still intend to do so in the future.
Any other questions for Lisa?
Just a quick one. Most people say your public library is the first thing people look at when they're coming into community, and maybe the second, the museum, your local museum. Being kind of a little bit of a history buff myself, I mean, I went to Gettysburg and Antietam on my honeymoon. I think that the museum's very important, and I know Alex worked a lot on some of the deferred maintenance that was there. What's the 5 or 10 year plan that you see now that some of that work has been done and a lot of the archives have been digitized and have, you know, people have access to it now? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. To be honest, it's always going to be a work in progress. Always, right? Our building was built in 1861, so there's always going to be maintenance that needs to be done. Right now, our roof is in bad shape. Right now, that's kind of our top priority as far as the facility itself goes. It is leaking through the roof onto our bliss room stage. The bliss room, I'm sure you all know, is, you know, our auditorium space and venue location where a lot of events are held. And so that is one of our top priorities, is getting funding for that. And that is something that Alex has actually been attempting to get funding for a few years, as far as I know. So that is, again, top priority. Also, for, you know, just community engagement, that is top priority as well. So that's why we're starting these focus groups. We just recently renovated our Central Vermont Railroad room. So that exhibit is brand spanking new. I hope you all come and see it. We will be opening July 2nd. We will be opening July 2nd. Hope to see you there. You know, it's great. It's a contemporary feel when you walk through the museum, and I hope you're all going to tell me that you've been there every year visiting and you're all members. Okay. It's a different feel than the rest of the museum because we have contemporized it a little bit. And so that's one of the things is with these focus groups coming in, we want to know, is that what our community wants? Is that what's going to bring people in? If so, let's start doing that to the rest of our museum. We are not going to do it to the rest of our museum if that's not what the community wants. I listed my education there in the beginning with my introduction. Throw it out the window. It means nothing. Whatever the community wants is what's going to keep the museum running. So that is top priority.
Lisa, thanks for coming in tonight.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on to item number 6. Chief Lamont with policy approval request.
Hello.
Chief, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, thank you. Just 2 seconds away from the agenda, just, we have some information on the Patriot Front information. If anybody here wants to give me a call, I can have explain it, all the intel we've had on it for the last 2 years. But just real quick, we're as equally as frustrated and disheartened by seeing it as everybody here, but I can go into detail outside of this forum if you'd like to get some information. But for tonight, policies. Not sure how in depth you want me to go because I could be here talking about these far more than 20 minutes. Do you want me to go one policy at a time?
Yes, please.
Okay. Just gonna grab one to start then. So domestic violence policy or domestic violence investigation and a lethality assessment program go hand in hand. Neither of these are new, by the way. They're just updated. So the reason behind these domestic violence investigation, domestic violence assault investigations are a little different than regular simple assault or aggravated assault. Domestic violence a lot of times it's underreported, most times it's underreported. A lot of times when you get there, you find that the victim is uncooperative. It's very common. So this policy kind of outlines what to look for, where to go for assistance in deciding who the primary aggressor is, and the steps you take in ensuring the safety of the victim. And it also outlines when you will use the lethality assessment. And what the lethality assessment is a form that was developed in Maryland several years ago. And it just kind of it's a scale to see what kind of danger that victim is in, whether they're cooperative or not. And it gives you an idea of what steps law enforcement should take to help secure the safety of that victim in the future. And it's more or less a check sheet. And like I said, they go hand in hand. I can go through it, or I can answer questions if you have specific, but again, they're pretty lengthy. I just don't know what you want me to, how you want me to go through these.
We've had them.
We
Did the
could be
public
there
have a chance to, are these on the website?
Is the packet on the website?
Chief, I got a question.
Absolutely.
Tim, I see on the domestic violence worksheet, arrest is encouraged and strongly preferred. Has that always been the case?
Oh, since I started in '99, it's been
Because,
the
as you say, the victim is often unwilling to
Right.
proceed, but that's not up to her usually.
So let's try to make, when I start, nothing has really changed with domestic violence investigation from when I started, and that was always the thing you were taught right from the get-go in your initial training was that often the victim, put yourself in their shoes, right? If you just got called there and then you go there and all of a sudden she's clear to the offender that you're helping put them in jail, she's now, or he becomes the potential victim of a future assault, so they become very uncooperative. So if you have a reason, any evidence that supports an assault has occurred, you should be looking to arrest somebody. That's always what you should be looking for. This is never something that you send down for review, which is very common with other cases. You send it to the state's attorney and they make the decision, or the decision is primarily on the cooperation of the victim. This is not one of those cases. This becomes primarily on the onus of the investigating officer. And this policy goes through what you should be looking for, body language, how the room, stuff that there's a lot of evidence there. Even if the person never says a word to you, there's a lot of evidence to be gathered just by being there. 2 people response, supervisor response if possible. Slow it down, separate, and talk to them, try to get some cooperation. And I can tell you from my experience, cooperation is probably 50% of the time. It's not often.
Mike?
Thank you.
Chief, could you just provide a little bit of context for how these revised policies or policy proposals were put together, who weighed in, that kind of thing, just so everybody kind of understands what we're looking at?
Good question, thank you. Should have done that at the beginning. So I'll go individually. So this policy and the lethality assessment policy, neither of these are new. These have been around in the department before I got here. To my knowledge, at least the 2 departments I work for, both had these policies prior. These particular policies tonight, every one of these have been through the police advisory board prior to being here. And then they've also gone in front of any agencies that may have had some interest in these. So in this case, domestic violence investigation policy, lethality policy have both been in front of Voices Against Violence. They've been in front of our internal domestic violence investigator who has been assigned to domestic violence investigation his entire time with the St. Albans Police Department. So those people have some stake in the game in these investigations, and they're the experts. We're not. I mean, I do these, I've done it for a long time, but I'm still not an expert in them. So they gave some feedback, and also the state's attorney, that there's an assistant state's attorney that does nothing but the domestic violence, so she also had some stake in it. They made their edits. I made those edits, then it went in front of the police advisory board, and they made some edits and suggestions, and here we are tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Chief, what was used, how long has the assessment been around?
So that hit the VSP, I would say, in my last year or 2, so I'm gonna guess that's been around since 2016, 2015.
What was used before that?
It was nothing.
Nothing.
There was no assessment. I mean, that didn't change anything with investigation. That assessment was just something that came out more or less for very uncooperative victims where you had no physical evidence. And it was something to, if you could get them to cooperate at all, to sit down with them and go through how many times you get, I mean, the questions, some of them may seem very minor, but they aren't. How many times you get verbal arguments? How many times those verbal arguments turn into something getting broken in the house? But those questions all lead up to what could be coming down the road for them. And it just gives a danger score. And then you try to explain to them that your score is this. With this score, we feel that it's likely that if this hasn't occurred, this is going to happen. And that gives an idea of where, and it's a nationally recognized form, and it does help in predicting, if it hasn't already happened, what could potentially happen on this current path. It's a really good setup,
So we need to approve each one of these.
if you could.
Can we approve them in totality?
I was gonna say, is that,
They are separate.
It's warned as a slate. You can move it as a slate at the end.
Just move them as a slate, you know.
So go on to the next one.
yep, let's move to the
Next one, just grabbing one, mental health response procedure. This is a new one for the St. Albans Police Department. The last agency I worked for had one. So this one was vetted through NCSS because they, again, are the experts in dealing with mental health, people in crisis. So the goal behind this policy was just to outline things to think about for officers to think about. But more so, because I get a lot of that in training, more so what I want them to do is when they get to the situation where I've been called to a welfare check, which is historically what the situation is, and I have somebody that I feel, as a police officer, clearly can't take care of themselves right now because they either just tried to commit suicide, that's the extreme, or they're making the statements that they're going to commit suicide and you really truly believe they are, and NCSS is unable to respond, which is very common at night or the weekend, and the person refuses to leave their house, and you've got to make a decision right there on the spot. Am I going to physically take away their freedom and put them in handcuffs and take them away and apply for a warrant with a judge? This policy talks about how that procedure works, because that's a very common scenario. And a lot of officers are hesitant to take somebody's freedom without an arrestable charge. And this just kind of talks about those steps, because that comes into play quite often, where you have to make that decision. Am I going to walk away, hope for the best that this person doesn't follow through with whatever threat they just made, or am I going to make the decision that I am going to physically take them into custody and put it in the onus of a judge to say that we're going to put them in a safe place for a few days, 72 hours. And this one was vetted pretty heavily through NCSS. And in here is, most of the language in here is quite honestly their language on how that works. And my whole career, I've probably done a whole 20 of these. It doesn't come up all that much, but there are the times when you feel somebody is really going to do some harm to themselves if you don't take them into custody.
my only question I had on this, Chief, was when I first read the subject matter, the mental health response procedures, my initial thought went to at what is a procedure for bringing NCSS in? I know it doesn't say NCS, but that's sort of what I read, that at what point is a mental health professional brought on site to deal with it. So I don't know if there's a better wording for that, but that's just where it took.
So quite honestly, the line was their line, their suggestion, but in here is numerous times it talks about when to call them on their 800, their 24-hour, if they're not with us. So we're lucky enough to have an embedded worker, but that embedded worker only works daytime, Monday through Friday. So we will always reach out to a crisis intervention specialist, even if it's weekend or nighttime, but the likelihood of them responding is pretty slim because they're trying to cover the whole county. So if they can, they will respond, but quite honestly, a lot of times it's up to the officer to make that decision on the scene.
And once again, I just wondered, should this be labeled procedures for dealing with mental health?
It can be.
Has it flip it, just
We can.
no big deal.
I don't mind changing the title.
Let's move on to missing person response.
Missing person response, this is not new. The reason this is in, we just updated it. The only thing we really changed is I added a lot, then the second page it lists 1 through 38, there's probably 138, but 1 through 38 questions or that the officers on scene should ask about. And one of the things we added was cell phones or other electronics that we could ping to try to locate that person right away. It wasn't in the old form, the old policy. That's why we updated it. More of the main reason why we updated it was because a lot of, especially the juveniles, I hate to say on TV, but a lot of the reason why we find people is because they don't turn their cell phones off. So, and they don't stop using their social media. So that wasn't in the old policy, so we wanted that in there. But other than that, this hasn't changed much. This just talks about, one, to be very clear that there's no waiting period for missing person. A lot of TV shows you watch, they say, oh, it's been 24 hours. Well, that's ridiculous. You can call it a missing person 3 seconds after you don't know where they are. So that's not true. And this just talks about the procedure to get a helicopter on scene and a canine on scene, and, you know, just go, it just makes it easier. Officers that have more than an hour, 3 minutes on the road should know how to do this, because these are so prevalent. But luckily, most of them turn into nothing, but officers, it could be one night where we have new people on. It'd be nice to be able to flip through this and see, who do I call, how do I get hold of, you know, a helicopter, how do I get hold of all these extra resources, because although we may not employ a helicopter and have all this, they're at our fingertips, it just, we need to know how to get hold of them, so this will tell you how to do that.
Okay.
How often do officers review this?
So they have to review them when we adopt them, and then this one's a 3-year, we have to update it, but every year they have to sign off again every year.
Do they have a series of these in their patrol cars they travel through the city?
They have a what?
Do they have these in?
Yeah, they can
down.
everything's electronic, so they can
Okay.
go onto them, yes.
Okay.
So it makes it nice, so, again, coming from my old agency, it was quite common to pull them up, just, if nothing else, there's step by step on how to do some of this stuff. I mean, it's not, you know, I'm not trying, nobody's gonna flip through them to make sure they're staying within lines, they should know that. But it's a good way to, step by step, again, how do I get a helicopter right now, and how do I do this, and gives you an idea how to do that stuff. Last one is standards of conduct. This one's pretty, it's kind of in depth. So I'm guessing every PD should have a standards of conduct, or rules of conduct, or however they word it. I just updated this one. St. Albans PD had one, it was quite old. The headings, there's general conduct, which covers everything from truthfulness, associations, police conduct. There's the next section, and that first one's got 21 sections. Next one's conduct, on duty, neglect of duty, so it covers when they're on duty, reporting for duty, the general responsibilities, cooperation, courtesy, impartiality. That covers 24 sections. Use of official position, that's the next section. It talks about using their ID for personal gain, bribes, gifts, conflict of interest, interventions when they're off duty. And the last section is completely about off-duty, what they do. And that's their off-duty authority, conducting business off-duty, civil action, or if they're a victim of a crime. And so this one here probably had the most scrutiny from the Police Advisory Board. If you talk to one of them, Jamie Pinkman is the chair of that team that works on these, and I give them credit, they did a great job tearing this one apart, made a lot of suggestions. We took every single one of them. I write a lot of policies, but I'm not, again, not an expert in anything. I just do the best I can to wrap things up, and I thought it came out really well. It covers a lot of stuff. This one will go out as soon as you guys approve it, it'll get adopted, and I'm sure I'll get some serious kickback from the officers because everything's in here, so it'd be really interesting to see.
One thing I mentioned earlier was the, on number 23, you have the social network websites.
Yes, we have a separate social media policy as well.
Are you okay?
You do.
So there's a question, Dom. If the police department has something in here, and we do in St. Albans City employee conduct policy, does the more strenuous one hold up, or do you update this one, or are the officers not bound by the city employee one, and they're bound by this one? How's that work?
Generally, the specific trumps the general, right?
Yes.
So generally, the officers all fly under these policies. Though other policies like pay and benefits and all that, it's codified, elsewhere. So the general rules, the specific trumps the general. And we would work to align those. Frankly, they're more out in front than the rest of the organization on some of these.
Our social media policy was passed, you guys approved it, I'm gonna guess September of last year, just a guess.
Yeah.
It's now open again, it's in front of the Police Advisory Board again, in light of all the recent stuff, so you're gonna see it again. So even though I have 1 year, 3 years as a review, if something comes up, we'll look at it again. Not a big deal, so you're gonna see that.
Okay, good.
Probably not for a couple months, because they've got like 5 or 6 in front of them right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief? Okay, entertain a motion to approve the slate of policies.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Chad, seconded by Jim. Any other further discussion, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, all the policies are approved.
I appreciate it for a well turnout.
Chief, thank you very much.
Good job, Chief.
Thank you.
We're moving on to item number 7, Chip Sawyer. If you want to come up, Chip?
Thank you. We have a request for a 30-minute parking spot on Center Street to meet some specific needs of a business and some regular clientele. We need a spot out front with some good turnover, some dependable turnover. So typically when we ask for a 30-minute spot. So this would be outside 15 Center Street, which is currently the Nourish Deli. And prepared an amendment in your packets. It would be a change to Title 17. It would add the on-street parking space on the northerly side of Center Street immediately in front of 15 Center to the list of 30-minute spots. And you'll see there's a picture in the packet attached to the amendment that shows that there is a fence where we currently have a parking information sign where we could post this 30-minute sign specifically to that space and provide some, elegant solution just for that one space.
Does it make sense, like, just 15 minutes written in paint right in the middle of that parking spot?
We could paint, I don't want to speak for Marty and PW, but we could paint, you want to go 15 or 30?
Or 30, sorry.
Yeah, 30, okay.
Yep, sorry.
We could do that too.
Okay.
I mean, we just did that as part of the change to put the handicap spot directly outside City Hall rather than where it was across the street.
Yeah. Okay.
We can look into that.
Just don't want to give anyone an excuse.
But, they wear away and
Yeah.
it's not easy to see in the snow, so it's always good to have the sign.
Yep.
When I first read it, Chip, I was thinking it might have been more than one space. Throughout the city, do we have a one space limitation?
We've got a couple in front of Rail City, and we've got 2 in front of the UPS store.
We have one in front of Boston Taylor too.
Yeah.
I think it's one in front of the UPS store, is it 2?
We've got 2
Two.
Are we good with one, or does 2 make sense?
Rick is good with, we've spoken to the business owner and they're fine with just one.
And the neighboring business owner as well?
We have not spoken to the neighboring business owner.
I think there's only 3 parking spaces in that, on Center Street up
There are
in that
about
area.
4.
No, 4 or 5, I think.
Vintage Therapy is open more often on the weekends when, Saturday and Sunday, we're not really doing parking enforcement anyway. And then Sage, Center Sage, haven't spoken with them about it.
Okay.
The request came from Norris, so we decided to put one, and one was fine with them. One right in front of their space.
Any other questions for Chip? Hearing none,
We need to adopt the first reading.
yeah, first reading.
Next, I think is you
Nope,
accept
I
the
don't
first
think we need
reading. Let us
No,
know
we
if you
don't.
have any edits or revisions.
We don't need to vote.
So, everyone's fine with accepting this?
Yes.
Okay. So, we'll have you back at the next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had another one as well, Chip, for window standards.
Yeah, responding to some community comments and some council comments, we have clarified, this is a proposal to clarify in the PHSO that the types of expectations for property management, that they do also include the cleanliness of windows and the potential disuse and deferred maintenance, or rather not deferred maintenance, but the clutter that can happen in window display cases in commercial buildings, especially if they're vacant. So just some feedback on this. We received, and we also saw that there were some vacant buildings in the downtown where the windows were starting to get dirty and clutter was starting to build up in the space because it was vacant and it was probably just convenient for the landlord or the property owner to let some things just sit around. We have made contact with two key landowners who have properties, especially on the dirty window side, and we got a response on that. There should be some movement on that. But we also did realize that this could happen again, and typically communication is the key, and we let folks know there's an issue, and they typically respond. But it's good to have a rule to back up and say, hey, look, you know, these are the expectations, it's in the ordinance, and we'd like everyone to follow these rules. So we still did pursue putting the, adding item M in the PHSO under the building and property owner obligations for commercial window spaces, that display windows in buildings in the city's commercial zoning districts shall be kept clean inside and out, and any cracks or damage shall be repaired. And if a building in a commercial zoning district is vacant, any display areas behind the windows shall be kept free of clutter, waste, trash, rubbish, or debris. And those words are pretty much pulled from other sections of the PHSO: waste, trash, rubbish, or debris, that sort of thing.
As far as cracks or damage in the window, what time frame are we talking about? Because a lot of times that happens and you're waiting for your insurance company to do an assessment and waiting for some money to replace it, especially if it's a big commercial window. I mean, I hear you and I see this, but I'm talking about commercial spaces that are still viable, that aren't empty.
Mm-hmm.
And how much time are you talking about if you give them to fix those?
Well, I do know that, you know, when the PHSO for the vacant building rules, that it also says that cracked windows are supposed to be secured. You know, one of the ways in which the PHSO has been most powerful is it allows us to create that chance to have the conversation with the property owner and say, these are the expectations for the ordinance. There's an issue here. We see it. What can you do about it? You know, and our goal is not to be punitive, and our goal is not just to collect the fines. Our goal is to get to the solution. So if we engage in a conversation with someone, and they have a legitimate reason that's connected to the repair, and they have no other way of documenting it, then I think we would consider that, as long as they're on a plan, and we would hold them to that plan.
Okay.
But washing it, you know, that's
different.
That you would expect if you could
They
clean
wash
boxes
their
sometimes.
windows on occasion,
Right.
yes.
And you know, picking up things behind as well. It'd be good if they could just.
I see the biggest problems being empty, vacant buildings with trash or storage, if you will, in the windows, so.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Chip? Everyone's good with this? So we'll accept it as presented,
Yes.
and we'll see you next month, Chip.
Yep, thank you.
And you're up for number 9 as well, which is resolution as alternate representative for Kingman Street project.
Yeah, Kingman Street project, I'm sort of the city's designee on the project. I could sign off on some of the change orders and other things if we go through this form for at least one of the funders, so we decided to pursue that. Actually, Tom Lights is also an alternate representative, but I'm normally closer to the project and can move things a little bit more quickly.
Alternate to who?
Dominic is our municipal project manager.
Okay.
And the city's primary authorized representative on the project.
Motion to approve the resolution, Chip Sawyer as alternate representative.
Second.
I just want to know before we vote, does Dominic really want to give Chip this much power?
I thought it was going through a little too smooth myself.
I know.
I've been down that street 3 times to go to Tetros, and every time I've seen him there.
Yeah, it's been it's been a thing. It's certainly been a thing.
All right, so
We'll get there.
We have a motion and a second to approve Chip as the authorized representative. Any further questions? None? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
I got, just, save that top spot for
Okay.
Did V-Trans ask for this, or were you thinking it would help your community relations if you had a little title? How do you get it?
Resume.
Yeah.
Helps his resume.
Yeah.
Let's move on to item number 10, presentation and adoption of the FY 52 enterprise fund budget with
We're
Tom.
doing these 30 years in advance?
That's good. For FY 52 rates.
Yeah.
Did I say 52?
Yeah.
Just trying to get ahead of it a little bit, Tom.
It's all right. You've got all the spreadsheets in front of you. You've got the rates. Why don't I start with the detail of the water fund? And then maybe finish up with the rate sheet at the end. And then Chip can hit the stormwater fund when it's that piece.
And the finance committee has already gone through this. Been presented to the finance committee. It's already gone to the finance committee.
Let me just hit some of the highlights here. On the revenue side, on water billing interest, the FY 22 number is really reflective of the actuals we're seeing this year. We're not seeing anything dramatic in terms of delinquencies associated with COVID. The state's programs have helped quite a bit, and there's one in effect right now for renters that are 80% below moderate income. And Kristen's working on that every day. Sharon in the office is working on that, so we're taking advantage of all the relief programs we can. But we're still seeing a little bit of increased revenue on our end, which is charges to the ratepayers. We think that'll take probably a year to sort itself out. Down on line 14, we use the term MXUs in here. MXUs are the what we call the smart points, which are the electronic devices that hitch up with your meter and hitch up with our billing system. So we have about 4,000 accounts. We have to install those smart points in every single one. They're typically in the basement. We have about 1,500 done. So there's a labor cost of that, and there's a materials cost of that. So we're proposing on the water and wastewater side to pull from reserves to pay for that next year. And there's probably a few years left to get this totally wrapped up.
So is that a replacement piece, or is that a new?
A bit of both. So the meters have a battery that were initially rated for 10 years. Most batteries are 15 because the 10-year rating was if your battery was outside. So the old way of reading the batteries, which we still do for a lot of accounts, is you drive through the streets with an electronic device, and sometimes if you can't get a read, you walk up to the house. The new system, we can read from radio antennas we put in a few places, and they actually read hourly. And the cool thing about it is that every day we get an email and the system detects leaks. So Kristen can reach out to customers directly and say, hey, we think there's an issue with your house, you might have a toilet running, something like that. Let's check it out and make sure you're not wasting money. Make sure we're not billing you for, some mistake, which is really a neat thing. And then we're not there yet, but soon we hope to roll out a website where if you've got this new Smart Point, you'll be able to log into the website, and it'll basically look like Green Mountain Power's website, where you'll just be able to see your historical usage and your bills. So it's a more modern system than what we've had. It's going to be helpful for leak detection on our end. It's going to be helpful for the customers, we hope. But it's a challenge getting in 4,000 people's basements. So we're hoping some of these upgrades will encourage more people to sign up voluntarily. But Kristen's doing the outreach. Marty and his crew are doing the installs. Heading down to the admin expenses, and for Bob, who's new, for water admin and wastewater admin, many staff at City Hall are allocated across the general fund and the water and wastewater fund. So, for example, everything that I do, a third of it hits water admin, a third hits wastewater admin, a third hits the general fund. Marty's crew is actually 75% water and wastewater. that's changed a little bit over the years. They were a little more general fund heavy some years back, but they're becoming a bit more subterranean over the years. So we look at that all the time. So you'll see the water admin expenses are really similar to wastewater admin expenses. So salaries are up aggregate 3%. With our new payroll system, we're showing things a little differently. If you go down to legal services, which is line 36, that's again reflective of this year. Just with COVID and some of the impacts, we had higher tax sale fees. We did hold the tax sale, and we expect those fees will continue into next year. So we try to be pretty careful in how we roll that out, and we give a lot of opportunities for payments. And the thing we tell everyone is, if you're delinquent, we can work with you, but we need a phone call. Headed down a little bit further to the second page, line 46, our insurance through the League of Cities and Towns. Behind the scenes, the products they use, the markets are getting a little harder, and so our rates are going up a little bit. Nothing that we're doing on our end wrong, it's just the market is increasing. Going a little bit further down to lines 52 and 53, last year, for the first time on water and sewer payments, the city elected to absorb any fees associated with online payments. So if you pay your bill online, there's roughly a 2% fee, but for water and sewer, the city pays that directly. We were guessing, estimating last year that'd be in the range of $10,000, and it's turned out to be quite a bit less. I expect it'll increase a little bit over time. It's made a lot of people happy, and Kristen can speak to that, especially that there's no fee. Going down a little bit further, line 63, we've had a very long-standing sound financial practice of having $100,000 reserved. That gives us some stability, and that's continued in this budget. Going down to the capital improvement plan, if you recall the general fund, the capital improvement plan was really put on hold for a year due to the financial pressures of COVID especially. So in the water and wastewater funds, there are some funds. The allocation fee reserve is revenue we collect, we try to save. So it's not money in, money out into our bank, into our savings account, essentially. Going down a little further to line 79, that's the smart points I mentioned a little bit earlier. And we're proposing $40,000 there and another $40,000 in wastewater. And then going it down a little bit further to line 82 is valves, and Marty can speak to that a little bit. We had a pretty significant valve replacement program that ended a couple years ago, and we invested in the range of $100,000 over a few years in new valves. And we thought we got there, we hit the pause button, and it turns out we need to go further and maybe continue that for a little while. And Marty can talk about better offline some of his experiences in Kingman Street and the valves. Heading down to the next page. No major changes to debt service on the water side. Something I wanna throw out there is the tank, the Aldous Hill tank. We've applied to USDA for a grant loan package, and we hope to hear in about a month about what that is. And we're also talking with the state, and next item on the agenda are some state funds that we have. So we're pursuing all options. If in the end we simply issue a general obligation bond, we don't have any sort of loan package for the tank, it'd be about $100,000 a year over 30 years. But we think we can do quite a bit better. Going down a little bit more to the plants. The salaries look like they're up, but again, it's a redistribution of an internal redistribution. There's no salaries above the 3% in the budget. Turning the page, most of the action in the plants is lines 137, 38, and 39, the chemicals. In talking to the chief operator, Troy Baker, over the years, chemical use at the plants is largely driven by rain. He's got to spend quite a bit more at Fairfax and both plants to deal with turbidity when there's a lot of rain. So that drives our chemical costs. So we try to budget, not necessarily for the high water mark, but for a reasonable average with a reasonable inflator. And we think we hit that target. The utilities, the electric, if you look back in the history, there's quite a bit of variation, but again, we try to budget for the average. And the variation is because Fairfax is gravity fed, and when Fairfax is down, we've got to pump a whole lot more water for a whole lot more money. So again, we budget what we think is a reasonable average. On occasion, we'll change that if we know there's some serious planned maintenance at Fairfax. Going down a little more to distribution, and again, this is roughly 35% of Marty's crew goes here, and another 35% goes in wastewater collection. The salaries are up, and this might be the story of the budget. We've all heard the story of the tight labor market. The public works crew is a younger crew in general, and we've put some incentives in the union contract that's in place to keep them, and the big one is paying them more if they get a CDL, which was a real goal of the department, and they've gotten there. A bunch of them have gotten there, so that's the reason for the salary increase. But if there's an emergency at 2 o'clock in the morning, several years ago, there was only 1 or 2 people you could call because only 1 or 2 could drive the truck. Now there's a whole lot more that can do that. So it's a big benefit to the department. And I think it's a morale builder for the crew to know that there's an incentive out there for them. The other significant item distribution, if we go down to line 160, which is R&M, pretty healthy number. That's a lot of the investment in the rolling stock. That's a lot of the investment in the pipes themselves. And so it's a healthy number, and we believe it's got to remain a pretty healthy number to keep everything rolling the way it is. That's also the number that gets hit if there's a break, and they've got to call in some help for the break. Going down a little bit further, operating supplies is a similar thing. That's all the trips they've got to do to Sticks and Stuff and Ace and other places to get everything they need. So we think those are reasonable numbers, but healthy numbers, consistent with what they're spending now and what they need. So overall, if you take a peek at the rate sheet, water is up about 8%, maybe 8% even. And we'll talk about combined rates for water and sewer. Water was a 0 the year before, so part of the 8% is making up for that 0 the year before. If we take a peek down to wastewater, a few different things driving wastewater compared to water. The first thing is looking at the revenue side, something similar again. The billing interest is increased, similar to water, similar to the COVID trends we've seen. Wastewater, we have the benefit of the contract with Northwestern Correctional Facility, and that's increased 3%. We've had a long-standing standard 3% rate increase, and that's worked for us and for them. And then going down to the expenses and the admin side, again, 3% salary increases as standard across the board. Just always some minor distribution issues that we deal with. And again, as in water, we've got a little higher number for legal due to the tax sale, due to the tax sale fees that we anticipate. If we head down to the next page, again on line 55, the credit card fees is now we've got an actual number to work with, so we've got a pretty good budget number for next year, we think. And again, down to line 63, we've got $100,000 for the budget stabilization. So something again that helps us achieve some good financial stability going forward. CIP is is very similar to water. We've got our allocation fees that we reserve and put in our back pocket. And we've got the $40,000 for the smart points that we're proposing to pull and use. And aside from that, that's the CIP. Some pretty serious action in debt. In FY #21, as part of the COVID relief package, the state offered and we accepted one of our long-term loans was essentially delayed a year. And so that was about a $90,000 impact on last year's budget that helped us get to a 0 on the rate. And so that's back. 1 year deferral was great, but it wasn't permanent. So the debt is up almost 100 grand, and it's basically in that one note. Heading down a little further into collection, again, roughly 35% of Marty's crew, and you see the same staff salary bumps that are driving the water distribution side, the same funds that we think are necessary to retain these folks. If we go down the next page, in line 137, which is the R&M, we've got a bump up there. We think that gets us better to the actuals. But again, this is everything that they've got to do on the collection side. This is a million little things that adds up to a pretty big number. And sometimes this is $5 a days, and sometimes this is 10 grand to deal with something more serious. So the actual bumps around quite a bit, but we think this is the appropriate number. Looking a little further down at the plan, it gets a little tougher because of the upgrade and the actuals. You almost lose 2 years of actual history because so much happened to impact things. It's a little harder to forecast. The salaries in the fringe are not really hard to forecast, and we know those numbers. One of the things that impacted us was sludge removal at the plant. Marty and Brian could explain it better, but we have to spend more this year, and we'll go over budget this year a bit on sludge removal because of some of the pauses that we had to hit during the upgrade. But we also think that we just need to budget more going forward. The centrifuge there, which dewaters, is basically running 40 or 50 hours a week, and we're keeping pace, but that's about it. So we've got Senasac coming in, and they've got their own essentially dewatering truck to assist. So we think that needs some more financial resources next year and probably for a few years. We've talked briefly with our engineers about any other options, just to make sure we're checking all the boxes to see is that a future capital project? Is that something that we could use stimulus funds for? They've said that no one in Vermont has in essence 2 dewatering systems, but they've also said it's not the worst idea, and so they started sort of playing around with numbers and scenarios a little bit. But in the short term, we just think we need more money, more time to run the centrifuge, probably some staff overtime, and potentially Senasac or Drumac or someone to assist us with sludge removal. Headed down a little further, chemicals are always a really big number, as are the utility costs. Again, we tried to be reasonable in the chemical budget and not necessarily budget for the high water mark, but more for the average. And we think we hit that mark. And the utilities, you'll notice, are a little bit down compared to history, and that's the solar impacting us. And that should impact us for a long, long time. We go down a little further, not a lot of action in Northwestern. Again, that the staff raises are just that we redistribute sometimes what cost center pays for what piece of which staff person. So standard 3%. Northwestern continues to be a good option for the city, a good option for them. So in wastewater, the back at the rate sheets real quick, the rate increases are more modest than water. And the blended rate increase is in the range of 5%. on the stormwater side, the rate increase is more, but we're starting from such a tiny number that it's a big percentage jump, but it's a small dollar jump. So, and Chip can speak to some of the more detailed issues here. A couple of things to call your attention to in the stormwater budget. Line 17 on the expense side, in the general fund has $50,000 in revenue to better account for all the time and energy that Chip spends and Marty spends and Marty's crew spends on the stormwater maintenance side and the stormwater admin side. And so that $50,000 is an expense of stormwater and is a budget is a revenue in the general fund and reduces the tax burden. So it's more appropriate as a cost here. We do have some funds budgeted for legal services, and that's all related to Chip's planned capital projects and some of the legal services there and associated with easements, land acquisition, those sort of issues. Headed down a little further to line 27. So Chip worked with some consultants and they developed the flow reduction, the phosphorus control plans, and those plans are developed. So there's no need to budget some of the big numbers we had in prior years. So there's a pretty substantial reduction there. Going down, I just want to point out briefly in line 41, we do have a modest budget for trees here. There's also some general fund dollars, $15,000 in the general fund for trees. You get credit for planting trees, some stormwater credit that Chip can give the details. So this budget may grow a bit in future years to take advantage of that. Down a little further, maintenance of stormwater treatment is up. Chip can speak to some of that detail. Chip, do you want to talk about that $45,000 for maintenance?
Yeah, that's basically the amount of money associated with maintaining the rain garden, mostly in Taylor Park. And some money we have budgeted that could refurbish and change the design of the stormwater planters in the park along Main Street.
So those are costs that would be otherwise in the general fund without the benefit of this fund.
Does the city still maintain the rain gardens on Bishop?
No, not in earnest. They're sort of just there for the moment, and we've been having conversations about whether or not they should be discontinued or whether there are landowners that really, really want them to stay and also might help adopt them.
Thank you.
And going down a little further to the CIP, we've got in the plans to move forward on the St. Albans Highway project. Chip calls it the SASH project. That's what I'll stick with. He likes his acronyms. And we've got some funds a little further down in lines 65, budgeted for some debt to move forward on that. So that's stormwater, water and wastewater in a nutshell. We think the rate increases are as good as we could do, given there was a 0 last year. Any questions?
I think I know the answer, but American Recovery Act dollars can't be put towards any of this moving forward.
Yeah, they can. Yeah, we don't have a real plan yet. We don't know the exact amounts of those dollars. We know one amount, but there's of course the county allocation that's still in the wind. But yeah, they can. But that's a dumb question as to how they're going to be used and what the plan is.
Yeah, I think it's early to start programming those funds until the rules come out. And whether you have 600,000 or 2 million depends how you would spend it too.
Right.
And we just submitted last week the first drawdown request, which would be half of the first allocation. So I believe the first allocation is 600 or 700. So half of that should be in by June 30th.
One question, Chip, this is probably for you on the regarding stormwater project. What's a Lemonade Drive project.
That would be the third one we're looking at, is to construct stormwater treatment in the land that the city owns to the west of Lemon Drive.
Okay. Anyone have any questions for Tom?
Tom, when do you foresee the public being able to get on our website to see what their usage is?
We just had our first training today, so now it's a matter of populating the data, doing a little bit of beta testing, but this summer.
So if I thought
Just for the 1,500 people that have the smart points installed.
For now.
Yep.
But if I thought my bill was high, I could look over my usage over the last, what, days or months or what?
The last few billing cycles since you had the smart point. And so if we put your smart point in 2 years ago, you can look at 8 quarters. If we just put it in, you're just gonna get the benefit going forward. But you can always call us. The older meters read to the 100 gallon. But over the course of a quarter, that's still pretty good. So if anyone ever has an issue with their meter, if they think it's a problem meter or they think there's something funky with their usage, we deal with that all the time.
Marty, the other question I had, is there a valve map? And what do you foresee as, how many valves we'll have to replace, because they're fairly expensive? How many valves will we have to replace per year until we've got a good handle on full replacement in the city?
There's valves mapped out on our water maps. We probably have in the system 500 or 600. I'm not sure we would ever get to a point where if we're replacing, there's a couple of challenges. How many can we replace in a summer? And whether they're an insertion valve or whether we go in and shut the line down, cut the pipe out, put a new valve in, take the old valve out. You're realistically probably looking at maybe 4 or 5 valves this summer.
Were all the valves replaced on Main Street, Fairfield Street, Lake Street, and now Kingman Street?
No, they were on Fairfield Street. There were some on Lake and Federal, none on Main. We're gonna put a new valve in on Main. When we had the leak on Lake, the first time SD Ireland hit the service line, it took us 12 valves to isolate that to a point where we could, and our guys were doing it under pressure at that point. So we're gonna put another valve in on Main Street in front of Derringer's that'll allow us to, when we're doing Kingman, we're putting in 3 new valves there, so that new line will have a valve at the top, bottom, and in the middle, so we can isolate.
So when
And
we
that's what we're
allocate,
trying to do moving forward.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. When we allocate $25,000 for valve replacement, is that enough or not enough? Or is that just about as many as you can do in a summer?
That's probably as many as we could do, but the reality is, if we get into a situation that we can't get a line shut down, we would have a company come in and do an insertion valve. And depending on the size of the line, those are anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000.
That's why we need $100,000 in budget stabilization.
And just to get back to the question about the boxes, just so the council knows, do city residents have priority over town residents?
Everyone's a user in the system, so anyone who's getting a new meter, new construction, or anyone has a broken meter, they get the new smart point. In general, it's been anyone who returns our calls gets a new smart point. We've tried to prioritize the high usage accounts, just because there's the most impact financially for everyone there, to make sure you're being billed right, make sure we're getting leaks. We certainly could prioritize whoever you want us to prioritize. But much of the challenge is just getting in the basements, getting the appointments scheduled, especially during COVID.
And one, Chip, at the meeting, the budget meeting, you brought up offsets on stormwater. Can you just, for 2 minutes, can you just tell the council what that's all about?
Whenever one of our actual treatment projects can also provide the treatment that's required of a private or other public site that's not the city take over other 3-acre permits, especially for the 74 Lower Weldon. That's going to be a huge treatment facility that drains most of the core downtown, and then all of Main Street and the BFA Weldon intersection area, and then all of Weldon. So there are like 3 or 4 3-acre sites that have their own new requirements that they have to meet. They can be met because they're already flowing through the stormwater treatment facility. But as part of this, it means that we get to engage in a mutually beneficial agreement with them that they will contribute for whatever their property represents for what's being treated at that site. So it helps with the sustainability of the entire operation, and it's a win-win for everyone.
Tom, one quick, obviously we've got increases on the funds. How will we make people aware and educate them about those increases prior to them getting their bill?
Typically, we don't. We roll out the new bills with the annual rate increases. So we don't in the sense that we don't do a separate mailing. We can certainly put something in Front Porch Forum. On the website, we've done that, but we don't do a separate mailing to people saying your rate's going to go up as of this date. And part of that challenge is, in the background, and it's been billed this way for 50 years, the flat fees you pay in your bill are actually billed prospectively, and the usage is billed retrospectively, and so the rate increases are a bit funky because you've essentially paid your flat fees for your, the upcoming 3 months already. So we notify people, but we don't do a direct mailing.
Does it make sense to include it in with the next bill? Just an explanation as to why.
Sure, we can do that. We can always put something in the bill, and we were planning on putting some info about the smart points in the next billing anyway, so we can do that.
Okay. Any other questions for Tom? Chip? Marty?
Motion to approve FY '22 enterprise fund budget.
Second.
We got a motion by Tim, seconded by Mike to approve the enterprise budget for FY '22. Any further questions? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to item number 12.
11.
Oh yeah, sorry about that, thank you. Approval of loan application for Kingman Street project. Tom, you're still up.
Not a whole lot to add, that's not in the cover memo. Pretty great deal for the city, a lot of low interest loan grant funds here to get us through the project. The only one thing I will add is everything Chip was talking about with stormwater is also eligible for the clean water funding sources here. So the same grants we're getting here, we can hopefully apply for and get some good grant loan combinations for some of his stormwater stuff. These would just need a voice vote and signatures, hopefully tonight.
Motion to approve loan application for Kingman Street.
Second.
So there's 2 total, Tom?
Yep, you just want to
Yep.
guess one around now? Yep.
So we have a motion by Tim, seconded by Jim for approval of the loan agreements for the Kingman Street project. Any questions for Tom? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposition? Motion passes. Now we'll move on to item number 12, and that is proclamation of which we had a discussion about previously. I will read them for people. Recognition of Pride Month. Whereas the uprising of the Stonewall Inn in New York City in June 1969 sparked a liberation movement that continues to carry on today among many, thank you, Chip, among many lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community members and allies in our state and country. And whereas June has received the nickname Pride Month as particularly significant time of year for LGBTQ residents to stand up as proud members of our community, even as they still risk higher rates of violence and discrimination. And whereas we, as the city residents, share the responsibility to recognize the work that must continue for the cause of safety and equity for the LGBTQ community. Now therefore, I, Timothy J. Smith, hereby recognize June as Pride Month in the city of St. Albans, and witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand this 14th day of June in the year 2021. So I will sign that. The second one is the first applause I've ever had in this position.
The next one will be when he leaves. Recognition of June 19th, Juneteenth, whereas men, women, and children who were enslaved in Texas were not informed that they had been granted freedom by the federal government until June 19th, 1865, which was more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation and nearly 3 months after the surrender of Confederate forces in Virginia. And whereas June 19th has remained a significant date of annual remembrance of our country's ongoing reckoning with the practice of slavery, which includes violence and discrimination against members of historically enslaved groups. And whereas we as citizens share the responsibility to recognize the work that must continue for the cause of racial equity in our country. Now therefore, I, Timothy J. Smith, Mayor, hereby join the state of Vermont and many of our fellow communities in recognizing June 19th, also known as Juneteenth, as an important day of remembrance and ongoing work towards racial equity in the city of St. Albans. In witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand this 14th day of June in the year 2021. Thank you for that. Lisa is still here. We'll move on. So we had consider appointments to the Historic Preservation Commission, of which we had an application for Lisa Evans and Barbara Weinstein. I would entertain a motion to approve both representatives to the HPC. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Chad, seconded by Mike. Any questions?
Should be a term of expiration of May 31, 2024, is that correct?
Yep. Does anyone want to interrogate Lisa anymore?
She sounded pretty well qualified.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did.
The only question I had for you, Lisa, is how did you end up at Brownington Museum?
Actually, in undergrad, I
Oh, is
took
that
an
what-
archaeological course, and my professor had done a dig up in Brownington, and so he was the curator, got me connected. And I said, sure, 4-hour round trip, 5 days a week sounds fun. So,
Yeah, you can't get there from here.
I presume your courses at Johns Hopkins are online?
yeah, it's the advanced academic program, so all courses are online.
There's two.
There's three.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve Lisa and Barbara. Is there any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none. Lisa, you are approved along with Barbara. And I know we still have a couple vacancies that we will have further, Chip will have further conversations with you. Actually, one vacancy, right?
One vacancy.
Yeah, one. And we'll have further conversations with you regarding that. Thanks for coming in. We look forward to the displays, the presentations when they're done. Do you have a time frame on that? Are you thinking of?
Well, it depends. So like I said, we are connecting with a graphic designer right now to help us create visuals. So timeline, we're hoping to be completed, printed, ready to roll by August.
I just want to sort of dovetail on that. Colleagues of mine through my day job and you're aware of this, I think, the Prohibition exhibit. So up in St. John, they received a grant to do a display as well on Prohibition, mainly along the Lake Champlain corridor up into Canada. And they're going to be shipping that down to us for display for our region. So it's going to be here at City Hall in the hallway. It'll be at the museum, and I think we're going to try to get it into the hospital as well. So it'll be a 1 month stay at each location. And it's going to be mobile like yours as well, that we can move to maybe the farmer's park and do some things like that as well. So keep your eyes open for that. I want to just thank Matt for help on pulling off the championship parade yesterday afternoon, and hopefully there'll be another one here on Wednesday evening. So we'll go around. I think that's all I had for now. Let's go around council reports.
Mr. Mayor, could I request that we let Councilor McCarthy go first?
Can do that.
Thanks, yeah. So I think we've had an incredible dialogue already about some of the work and really the work that we still have to do around issues with equity and inclusion and justice. And I think that some of the recent conversations that we've had have brought up some challenging questions about what our role is, the city council, what we want to direct the city manager to do in terms of engaging with staff. And we've had training. We need to have more space, I think, for opportunities for learning and growth, and especially the repair of harm. When someone who's representing the city, whether that's somebody who's in a volunteer capacity, somebody who's been appointed, or whether that's a staff member, whether it's one of us as an elected official. And Chad had at one point, I think, brought up the idea of having an equity committee. We heard some support for that idea in public comment. And so I wanted to request that on our agenda for our next meeting that we take a look at a proposal, and I'm happy to work to pull in community voices for what that should look like. That we establish an equity committee and charge them with looking at the policies that we have in place in order to make sure that we have the most welcoming community that we can for all the different people that we have in our community and hope to welcome here. So I know we're not alone as a community in being faced, especially in Vermont, with a lot of white people who are leaders having discomfort with questions about race and equity and inclusion and the policies that we have that continue to perpetuate systems that support us being in power. And I think we need to create some space for some conversations about where we could improve, where we could do better, what symbols that we want to celebrate, and when it's appropriate to do that. And so I hope we can do some work in the next few weeks and come up with a proposal to move that forward for a future city council meeting.
Thank you, Michael. Chad, thanks for giving your time up to Mike too. Tim, is that what you did?
My pleasure.
I would want to make sure that that was valuable, but I also don't want to take away from the normal stuff that you talked about. So can he have extra time to just do his board stuff too? That's probably a conversation for all of us. And now, because he has some other stuff he probably wants to talk about too.
I guess the one other thing that I would want to say, I really appreciate everybody's being very generous to me this evening with their time. I don't know what's happening, but I do want to say we talked a lot in the finance committee meeting around the enterprise budgets about the value of investing in the crew that we have, the expertise that's building in a relatively young crew, the good kudos that we're hearing from across the community for the work that they're doing, and I just want to thank the rest of the council for supporting that conversation and continuing to invest in that crew that Mari's leading, because what I'm hearing in my ward is that the the hard work, the ability to, you know, come out in the middle of the night to deal with a water main break, you know, and to help people at the level of customer service in this labor market. If we don't invest in people, we're not going to be able to have that success moving forward. So I just really wanted to underscore how important that is, and in light of the fact that we had a 0% increase last time, and we have a real need to invest in those folks and our infrastructure, it's important what we did tonight.
Jim, do you want to give Mike your time too?
Sure, you got my time.
Go ahead.
I really don't have anything to, not any complaints in Ward 2. I had someone in Huntington Street that was looking for, I think I might have brought up last night, one of the signs for the, you know, the community signs for speeding and children, and, you know, the ones that we put on other poles. And I think we need, I think I asked that we expand that over the proposal we had last time and try to get some.
We know when those signs are coming in, Chip or Marty?
I don't, I can find out. We've had a ton of signs that are on back order because of shortage for them.
Right. So, I mean, other than that, Ward 2 I think is doing great. I will echo what Mike said about the Marty's crew, and also would like to expand that to administration, police, fire. I mean, you know, with suffering through a year of COVID, a lot of communities are a lot worse shape than we are. We've managed to survive. We've managed to keep our personnel, which is a big thing, and I'm really proud of this community. I'm glad to live here. And kudos to all of these folks. I think they're doing a great job.
Thank you, Jeff.
That's it.
Chad?
Just a couple of really quick things. Dom, I'm gonna send you a link that Zach sent me from the Anti-Defamation League. Just check it out. It might be something that would be good for us all to do. It's a training. I want to say it's in person, but I'm not 100% sure. But I'm gonna send you the link to investigate it. I also want to thank the Public Works Department and the PD and Zach and anyone else who's been picking the white nationalist propaganda off signs. I know when someone gave me a call at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning, I went and got what I could find, and then I emailed Marty and the chief and stopped the police officer that I saw, and they were on it pretty quickly. So many kudos to them for that. And then, has there been any discussion on the railroad tracks on Nason Street? Nothing, okay. And then I just want to clarify, there was a big, huge discussion on social media about the green belt and who needs to maintain the green belt. So whose lawn is that to mow? Is the city supposed to mow the lawn on the green belt? So it is city, it is the resident's property, and we own a right-of-way over it. So it is the resident's responsibility to maintain. Okay, thank you. Just want to clarify that. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks. Ward 5 has been pretty quiet for the most part. I had an issue with the greenbelt with a constituent, which Marty helped me out on a little bit. And I'd also like to, as everybody else has said, the staff and employees have been great and deserve whatever we can afford to pay them. And thirdly, things have been pretty quiet in Ward 5 until Saturday or Friday when I heard from Ryer, and I'm glad I did. And the ensuing discussion and dialogue tonight and elsewhere was informative, and I think we can all move forward from there. I think a lot has been said about it, and I'm not going to add any more, but I think we'll move ahead in a constructive way, all of us.
There's also pretty loud music the other night on.
Pardon me?
There's also pretty loud music the other night on Ferris, I heard.
Coming from his house?
I don't know if it's your house.
Oh, my house. Unless it was in my car.
I could hear it from Rob, so I just...
That wasn't your house?
What time was that? What time was that?
What?
What time?
I was like midnight.
Oh my God.
It was real loud.
Oh.
It was like,
You weren't bothered by the parade yesterday, I hope.
By the way,
That's Main Street, yeah.
I'm volunteering
Somebody
to
was.
donate my council salary to the employees of the city.
Appreciate that, Jim. Tim? You're good? Anyone else have any other business?
I just, one more quick thing. Thank you, Marty and your crew, for cleaning up all the graffiti at Home Park as well, so, much appreciated.
The graffiti.
I would just add that it's,
Give it a yeah.
if people see that, the quicker we know about it, the easier it is.
I saw the slide, but I didn't realize they got so much.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
went through there.
Did they go anyplace other than Houghton?
Lower Weldon.
Lower Weldon.
Yeah.
A lot of things around there, so hopefully something was picked up.
No leads that we know of. Marty, as far as no one saw it. All right, let's consider approval of meeting minutes from 5/10/21 and 5/18/21.
Motion to approve minutes, 5/10/21.
Second.
Motion from Tim, seconded by Jim. Any comments, corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion passes.
Special meeting, 5/18/21.
Second.
Seconded by Jim, motion by Tim. Any corrections or changes? Amendments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion to approve warrants, 5/31/21.
Second.
Motion from Tim, seconded by Jim for approval of warrant 5/31/21. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, warrants approved, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Chad, second by Mike. We are now adjourned at 8:55.